On the day of Alice's father's surgery, she missed the distress call from her first love. Her first love died tragically on the same day. Alice blamed me for blocking this call and thus hated me for a lifetime. She hated me but still entered into a marriage alliance with me just to torture me. She said that a person like me doesn't deserve happiness. In this new life, I watched helplessly as she answered that call and then lost a leg. When the crying sound came, my mind was still in chaos. I felt cold all over and seemed a little hot at the same time. I looked around in confusion. The nurse was pushing someone and running towards the operating room. Alice was supporting her mother who seemed about to collapse at any moment and following behind. And I, like a person without a soul, followed closely behind the two of them with things in my hands. Lying on the hospital bed was Alice's father. "Mom, Dad will be fine." Alice frowned. There didn't seem to be too much worry on her face. "The company is in a mess now. Your father can't have an accident. Otherwise, our Alice family will fall." Alice's mother was on the verge of tears. "Now medicine is advanced. I also searched on the internet. As long as the doctor performs normally, there won't be any accidents." Alice comforted. When the operating room door closed, I finally came to my senses. I was reborn back to the day when Alice's father had a heart attack. It was also the day when her first love, Matthew, died. My heart was beating wildly. In my previous life, when Matthew's call came, Alice's father was being rescued. The doctor said there might be danger at any time. My family and the Alice family have been friends for generations. The two families live in the same villa community and are neighbors. I was also watched and grown up by Alice's father since I was a child. I was worried that something unexpected might happen during Alice's father's rescue. If Alice didn't wait here, she would definitely have regrets. So when I saw Matthew's call coming, I quietly muted Alice's phone. Later, after Alice's father was rescued, Alice saw Matthew's missed call on her phone. When she called back again, it couldn't get through. The next day, the news of Matthew's death came out. Alice was extremely regretful. She grabbed my collar and gave me several hard slaps with bloodshot eyes, blaming me for killing Matthew. If I hadn't muted her phone, she could have gone to save him. I was the culprit. In my previous life, I had never experienced such a thing. A life disappeared because of my own reasons, which made me fearful and terrified. I was also brainwashed by her and thought that all this was my fault, so I let her vent her anger on me. From then on, I became the target of bullying by all my classmates. Everyone said I was a murderer. I lived in a daze. My grades dropped all the way from second in the grade. Finally, Alice used means to prevent me from taking the college entrance examination. Later, she used my guilt towards her to make me agree to marry her and then torture me. She said, "Alex, a person like you doesn't deserve to start a new life. Don't try to escape. You should live in pain all your life. Remember day and night that you killed a person. You can't forget this matter in your life." I lived in self-blame like this. I agreed to Alice's unreasonable request and married into the Alice family. She made me live in the darkest basement of the Alice family and live a life worse than that of servants. Finally, I froze to death on a snowy day. And Matthew also died on a snowy day. The ringtone of the mobile phone pulled me back from the memories of my previous life. The door of the operating room had already closed. I stood dazedly at the door of the operating room, looking at the constantly ringing mobile phone. It was Matthew calling. The ringtone gradually increased. I stared at the screen, and my fingers were trembling. In my previous life, because of this call and because I meddled in other people's business, I harmed myself and my family. This time, I won't be stupid again. Alice was still comforting her mother. The ringtone didn't seem to attract her attention. The environment was too noisy. People were coming and going. The sounds of talking and crying were all mixed together. For Alice to hear the phone ringtone, she really needed to use a little effort. Suddenly, my tears flowed uncontrollably. It turned out that in my previous life, even if I didn't mute the phone, Alice still couldn't answer Matthew's call. It turned out that all this was not my fault at all. I pressed the volume button of the mobile phone and gradually turned the ringtone to the maximum. Alice finally heard it. She frowned and gave me a reproachful look. "Who is calling?" "Forget it. Hang up." She also knew that at this time, no one's call was more important than her father's life safety. I sneered in my heart and walked over and stuffed the phone into her hand. What choice will she make this time without my interference? Apparently, Alice didn't expect it to be Matthew's call. She pursed her lips. Her fingers stopped on the screen for a long time without answering until the call automatically stopped. "Is it your aunt calling?" Alice's mother casually asked. Alice just said it wasn't. The phone rang again. Alice's mother also saw the name on the screen clearly this time. Her face immediately became ugly. "You are still fooling around with him? You really want to piss us off." Alice's mother was so angry that she was panting. "Mom, Matthew must have called because of something urgent." After saying that, Alice looked at me. I could see that she didn't seem to want to answer the phone at all. She looked at me like that, as if she wanted to hear some words of dissuasion from me. But I only found this scene extremely ironic. Yes, she couldn't blame her parents. Only when I stopped her did she have a reason to make excuses for her actions. "Alex, persuade her. She is simply outrageous now." Alice's mother looked at me reproachfully. I raised the corner of my mouth sarcastically. The whole family expected me to be the bad guy so that they could all resent me with a clear conscience. Why didn't I understand this in my previous life? When I was being tortured by Alice in my previous life, Alice's mother only said, "Alex, be patient. When the anger in Alice's heart subsides, it will be fine." Alice also looked at me expectantly. I could clearly feel that she hoped I could give her a reason not to answer Matthew's call. But I said, "Auntie, Matthew's call keeps coming. Maybe she really has something urgent? Now Uncle is also in the hospital. There are doctors here, and we are all here too." I didn't give anyone any advice. How to choose is entirely up to them. After Alice heard this, a strange look flashed in her eyes. Then she walked to the side and answered the phone. Soon Alice ran back. She looked extremely anxious. "Mom, I have something urgent to do and I have to go out first. Your dad is still lying in the operating room. Do you have to leave at this time just for that hooligan?" Alice glanced at me. "Isn't Alex here with you?" Then she ran out. "Yes, with me here. I am just a person who cleans up her mess." Alice's mother was so angry that she covered her chest. Unable to vent her anger, she could only turn to look at me. "Look at you. You just let her act recklessly. Why didn't you stop her? You just watch her fool around with that man." Alice's mother looked at me with a look of disappointment. I only felt extremely disgusted. She couldn't control her own daughter. Instead, she blamed me. What responsibility and obligation do I have to control her? Just because we are neighbors? Just because I showed affection for Alice? My phone rang at this moment too. I frowned and looked worried. "Dad. What's wrong?" "I'll go there right away." After hanging up the phone, I said anxiously to Alice's mother, "Auntie, my dad is in the hospital now. I have to go there quickly." Alice's mother obviously didn't want me to leave, but she couldn't find a reason to keep me. While she was in a daze, I turned around and slipped away. That's right. I deliberately sent a text message to my dad and asked my dad to act in a play with me. This disgusting family. I don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. Of course, because there are still business dealings between our families, my father still put on a full show and really found a reason to go to the hospital. I suppressed the excitement in my heart. Next, Alice's father will be given a critical illness notice, and Alice's mother will have a cerebral infarction due to anger and anxiety. Of course, because in my previous life both I and Alice were there, everything proceeded in an orderly manner, and in the end, nothing major happened to either of them. But this time, it's different. Alice and I are childhood sweethearts. We were born only a few days apart. Since we were young, our parents have arranged a baby marriage for us. As required by our parents, we have been in love from kindergarten all the way to the second year of high school. Alice grew up as Alice's mother hoped. She is excellent in character and learning and has always been ranked first in her grade. She is recognized as a cold and aloof goddess and top student in the school. Perhaps it was more than a decade of disciplined life that made Alice tired. In the second year of high school, Alice suddenly became rebellious. Matthew transferred to our school at the beginning of the second semester of senior high school. He was slovenly. When everyone was wearing bulky school uniforms, he was wearing tight pants and had an earring on his ear. There was a jangling chain on his pants, striking the hearts of every student who was bowing their heads and studying. Everyone was attracted by him, and Alice was no exception. She had mechanically fulfilled the requirements of teachers and parents for her since she was a child and never resisted. When Matthew appeared, her numb eyes instantly lit up. I had never seen that kind of look in her eyes before. My heart instantly felt a painful feeling. I knew that something seemed to be about to change. Matthew was like a piece of sodium metal, breaking into the lake where Alice had been immersed for many years, making Alice's peaceful life instantly boil. She finally experienced the taste of freedom. She began to skip classes and have puppy love. She began to do things that she didn't dare to do in the more than a decade of suppressed time. I had advised her countless times to study hard and that the future was important. But she said to me, "Alex, you are jealous, right?" She blew smoke rings in my face and looked into the toilet from time to time. In the toilet, Matthew was pulling a boy in. Soon, muffled groans came out. "Alice, Matthew is not a good person. Stay away from him." Alice threw the cigarette on the ground, crushed it with her foot, and curved her lips. "You speak ill of others behind their backs. Are you a good person?" I still wanted to persuade her earnestly, but Alice was already full of impatience. "Is it that I have been too gentle with you all these years that you are getting pushy with me? If you say one more bad word about Matthew, I won't be polite. I advise you to mind your own business. Such a boring life is enough for you to endure alone." 06 Everything that happened in the past is vividly in my mind. I have regretted interfering with her countless times. Fortunately, I have a chance to start over. When I arrived at the hospital, my father was sitting on one side with an 4 drip on his hand, and my mother was lying on the bed playing with her mobile phone. Seeing the two of them, my eyes instantly turned red. After marrying into the Alice family in my previous life, I never saw them again. Later, when the Alex family went bankrupt, I wanted to see them, but Alice wouldn't let me. After marriage, I was completely under house arrest by Alice. "Are you sad? Didn't your Uncle Sue be rescued?" Father stood up, and his face showed an indescribable emotion. Mother patted my back and kept comforting me. "Son, think about it. Birth, old age, sickness, and death are a part of life." Alice's father was thus judged dead in the mouths of my parents. I held back my laughter and explained. Only then did I notice that there was an 4 in my father's hand. "Dad, what's going on? Didn't I ask you to act? Why did you really get an 4? I was full of worry. In my previous life, Alice said that her father died of rectal cancer. I immediately panicked. "Dad is fine. It's just that my body has been a little uncomfortable these days, so I came to have a look. The doctor said it's nothing serious." Father looked at me lovingly. "No. A full body checkup must be done. I can't listen to anything now." Not long after my father died in my previous life, my mother jumped off a building and followed my father. In this life, I will make my parents live a long life no matter what. "First tell us what's wrong with you. You are always clinging to that girl from the Alice family. Why did you leave today when such a big thing happened in her family?" There was a hint of jealousy in Mother's words. I sneered disdainfully. "Alice herself doesn't accompany her father. What am I still doing there? Don't mention their family anymore. Arrange a physical examination now." I didn't want to mention Alice. I immediately took my parents for a physical examination. The Alex family is not short of money. That night, the hospital arranged some examination items that didn't require fasting for Dad. As soon as the results of the enhanced magnetic resonance examination came out, I breathed a sigh of relief. There is a tumor on my father's rectum, but the mass is not large. As long as it is removed as soon as possible, there will basically be no problem later. After looking at the film, the doctor kept praising me. Your child is really a lucky star. Problems on the rectum are usually very difficult to detect. Generally, when the body starts to have symptoms, it is basically advanced stage. It is very difficult to detect it with ordinary physical examinations. The doctor sighed with emotion. Father also thought I was his lucky star and praised me to the doctor with a face full of pride about how excellent I was. I stood aside. For such praise, I only felt ashamed. I am not a lucky star at all. I killed them in my previous life. 07 The next day, I asked for leave from the teacher and was ready to accompany my father for the operation early in the morning. As soon as my father's operation was finished in the morning, a person was sent to the emergency room of the hospital. When I saw it, good heavens! Isn't the person lying on the hospital bed Alice? She was covered in blood. The wound on her left leg was even more shocking. A policeman was following behind. When I saw this, I quickly grabbed her. Comrade policeman, what happened? The policeman glanced at me and frowned and scolded, don't ask. Comrade policeman, I know that person. That's my neighbor. Of course, I knew that the policeman wouldn't reveal information casually. But when I said this, the policeman quickly pulled me aside and took a statement from me on the spot. It turned out that the police received a report from the masses this morning and only then did they find the injured Alice. You have their family's contact information, right? Hurry up and contact her parents to come over. After hearing this, I felt a heavy heart. In this life, Matthew didn't die? Did Alice save him? Then after Alice saved him, why didn't Matthew call the police immediately? Where is Matthew? All this doesn't seem so simple. But looking at Alice like this, I inexplicably feel a sense of pleasure in my heart. You like Matthew and freedom. Do you still want freedom next, Alice? Comrade policeman, Alice's father had a heart attack and was hospitalized yesterday. If you contact her mother now, she definitely won't be able to hold on. I said considerately. The policeman was also full of emotions. No matter what, her family must be present in her situation. I directly gave the phone to the policeman to avoid them having to look it up. The policeman contacted Alice's aunt, and soon she rushed over. When she arrived, the doctor just came out and asked the family member to sign for the operation. The left leg is severely necrotic and must be amputated. Alice's aunt seemed unable to bear such a blow and almost lost her balance. She glanced at me standing aside at a glance and roared, "What on earth happened? Why didn't you control her a bit? Didn't you go with her? Nonsense. What are you yelling about here? What does this have to do with my son?" My mother suddenly appeared, with a cold face and questioned Alice's aunt. She didn't expect my mother to be here, and her face immediately became ugly. She said awkwardly, "No, it's just that I see that he usually chases after Alice. When such a big thing happens to Alice, he doesn't say to stop her. If he could control Alice a bit, this wouldn't have happened today. Cut it out. He has no obligation to control her. Besides, his dad is in the hospital and just had an operation. At this time, instead of accompanying his dad, he chases after Alice? He must be a fool. Can Alice be more important than his dad?" Knowing she was in the wrong, she didn't dare to say anything more. She turned around and continued to discuss the final result with the doctor. Of course, it was amputation. In the winter in the North City, even ordinary people can freeze to death. Alice is still injured. It's really lucky that she didn't die. My mother pulled me into my father's ward with an unhappy face and murmured, "The Alice family really doesn't have anyone who can be sensible. They want to throw everything on my son." You still said that the two families will become in-laws in the future. They rely on Alex's liking for her and completely don't take Alex seriously. If they really get married, it will be terrible. As she spoke, she turned her head and poked my temple with her finger. "You are also. You just had to fall for that girl Alice. That girl has a very cold temperament. Marrying her, you don't know how hard it will be." "I know, Mom. I don't like her anymore. I said in a bland tone. My mother opened her mouth. The words she hadn't finished were stuck. She looked at me in disbelief. Have you changed? You really don't like her anymore? I nodded firmly. Alice even had her leg amputated for a hooligan. A person like this. I clicked my tongue in disgust. My parents were also shocked. After hearing me tell the story, they both sighed deeply. I also said that Alice has a cold temperament. So she didn't like our Alex at all. My mother had long been displeased with me always accommodating Alice. Now hearing that Alice had broken a leg for another man, she had no sympathy for her at all. 08 A few hours later, Alice's aunt knocked on the door of my dad's ward. At this time, in front of my sick dad, my mom and I were eating delicious barbecue, punishing him for always not having time to accompany us. Dad pretended to be angry but let us act willfully. As soon as Alice's aunt came in, I felt her face sink, but she still forced out a smile. Brother Alex, are you feeling better? Father nodded and asked directly, I heard that something happened to Alice's father too. Is he better? He has been transferred to a general ward. It's just my sister-in-law. The sequelae of cerebral infarction is a bit serious. And Alice? As she spoke, she started crying. Alex, go and see her. She just woke up. I continued to eat the kebabs heartlessly and murmured, I'll go see her when she is better. Alex. Alice is like this now. If you don't go to see her, it's fine. You still have the mood to eat barbecue. Maybe I have been a licking dog for too long. Aunt naturally blamed me. She couldn't stand anything I did. Aunt, what I eat is my freedom. Alice's broken leg wasn't caused by me. My mom didn't even care about me. But you are taking care of me. Besides, Alice has a boyfriend. Don't always link her with me in the future. I wiped my mouth, took away the finished garbage and walked out. In fact, even if Aunt didn't say anything, I was going to see her. After all, no one wants to see her miserable state more than I do. Not only will I go, but I will also pierce her heart. After throwing away the garbage, I went to Alice's ward. When she saw me, she just lifted her eyelids. Pour me a glass of water, Alice said. I stood by the bed and didn't move. I just looked at her from head to toe. After my aunt leaves later, you arrange for Matthew to come in and see me. Alice continued to talk to herself. I sneered. Do you know where Matthew is? I asked. It seems that Alice completely doesn't know that she was abandoned by Matthew yesterday. Looking at her calm and serious look as always, I guess she still doesn't know that she has been amputated. Alice had an expression of not wanting to waste words with me. She held out her hand coldly and said, Lend me your phone. I am naturally happy to lend her my phone. But after she dialed Matthew's phone number, the opposite side showed that it was turned off. She didn't give up and called several more times, but it still showed that it was turned off. Matthew must have had an accident. Call the police quickly. Alice looked worried. I only felt sarcasm. Sure enough, it's true love. She has injured herself and still worries about him. But after knowing the truth later, will you still love him? Matthew is fine. He left the country early this morning. How could it be? Alice was a little disappointed, but soon cheered up again. I know. He must be worried that my parents will blame him. This guy is so timid at this time? I dared to go find him yesterday. What is he worried about? I couldn't listen to her stupid words anymore and interrupted her directly. You were sent to the hospital today only because you were found by an old rag picker. I felt that Alice was already a bit in disbelief. She still insisted, how could it be? Yesterday when you were not around, your mother had a cerebral infarction and will have to lie in bed for the rest of her life. I continued to release news that would make her collapse. Obviously, Alice was reluctant to believe it, but her expression was indeed touched. She was a bit regretful. But this was not enough to make her collapse. After all, she had always been calm. 09 Also. I glanced at her leg and said faintly, because you weren't sent to the hospital in time, your leg was amputated. Alice was stunned for a moment. She tried to feel it to prove that I was lying. Then she frantically sat up, disregarding the pain of her wound, and suddenly uncovered the quilt covering her body. Seeing her left leg that was only half left, she completely collapsed. How could it be? How could this happen? My leg! She screamed in the ward without any image, desperately smashing things, grabbing her head, and even slapping herself. How she wished this was a dream. She tried to stand up but directly fell to the floor. Because her right leg had a comminuted fracture, even if it was cured, there would be sequelae. She liked freedom the most. Because she yearned for freedom, she was attracted by the unrestrained Matthew. But now, she won't be free for the rest of her life. Even with a prosthesis, for someone like Alice who pursues perfection, she still can't accept it. I quietly exited the ward and thoughtfully closed the door for her. Other patients still need to rest. In the end, the police found nothing. That place is an old city area with many blind spots for surveillance. Now only by finding Matthew can the truth be revealed. In my previous life, Alice always hated me for not letting her answer that call and causing Matthew's death. Because I had never experienced such a thing at that time. A life was gone because of my obstruction. I was really blaming myself. But later I figured it out. If Matthew really needed help, he could have called the police instead of asking Alice to go there. All this was a trap for Alice from the very beginning. As for the person behind this trap, I believe they will appear soon. Alice was in a slump because of recuperating from her injury. While I took the college entrance examination and was admitted to my ideal university with the first place in the school and the second place in the city, I chose the major of financial management because Alice's current situation is not miserable enough. On the day of the entrance banquet, the so-called person behind the scenes appeared. It turned out that Alice's father had an illegitimate daughter outside long ago. Now he blatantly brought her back home. For no other reason, the Alice family doesn't need a useless person who is in a slump. Alice's mother is also paralyzed in bed and needs someone to take care of her all the time. Naturally, Alice's father has no scruples. When Olivia appeared, I could see the ambition in her eyes at a glance. She tried hard to blend into this circle, but I still saw her guilty conscience. She had been raised freely outside for so many years. I heard that she dropped out after not even finishing 9 years of compulsory education. Now Alice's father is preparing to directly take her to take over the company's business and then arrange a marriage partner for her as soon as possible. Alice's father has always thought that education is of no use. Talking on paper is not as good as practical operation. Once Alice was excellent, so he wasn't in a hurry. Now this daughter is not capable. He can only take her to get started as soon as possible. I stepped forward and greeted Olivia considerately. Her face flushed instantly. Hello, Olivia. I am Alex. I am your neighbor. Welcome to my entrance banquet. Olivia has been looked down upon by many people during this period. I am the first person to greet her warmly. She is extremely flattered. Alex, why are you talking to her? She is an illegitimate daughter and has no education. Don't have anything to do with the Alice family. After all, you had a good relationship with Alice before. My parents have always told me not to have anything to do with the Alice family anymore. They think the Alice family is too messy. Mom and Dad, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. On the day of university registration, Alice came out to see me off, which was a rare sight. Alex, why did you choose a university so far away? Wait for me for a year. How about we apply for a university near home together? There was a rare look of expectation in her eyes. I just smiled. Although this sentence really made her very cheeky, I didn't scold her. There are still more things that can stimulate her in the future. I chose a city in the south because I hate the cold very much now. When I was frozen to death in my previous life, I always dreamed of going to a warm place. I am planning to take my parents to a warm place to spend the rest of our lives after that matter is over. After going to college, I study hard and actively participate in various activities at the same time. I play badminton and volleyball and sportswear. On weekends, I drink and brag with my classmates in seaside pubs and travel everywhere. There are all kinds of beautiful and hot girls in my circle of friends. I actively share my daily life in my circle of friends with the caption, "The teacher is right." We are free when we go to college. We can skip classes, drink, dress freely, and fall in love freely. I know that Alice has always been following my circle of friends. This message is enough to break her defense. I just want to let her know that the freedom she longed for in high school is nothing. And Matthew, who attracted her, is nothing special either. In college, anyone can do what Matthew did in high school. I also want to make her realize that she was only half a year away from the freedom she wanted. Those actions of hers that she thought were great and rebelled against her parents were not great at all, but stupid. Parents may have some desire to control us, but Alice's father and Alice's mother are really not so strict with her. She has her own room, her own hobbies, and pocket money that she can spend freely. The only requirement of Alice's father and Alice's mother for her is to let Alice shoulder the Alice family in the future. Besides, they didn't really control her at all. She is just living too happily, so she thinks everything is a shackle. Sure enough, after Alice saw this circle of friends of mine, she immediately called me. At this time, I was dancing in a bar with my friends. The atmosphere around was extremely lively. "Alex, is it freedom when you go to college?" "Of course," I answered casually while echoing my classmates' words. "Okay, I won't talk to you anymore. Everyone is waiting for me." After saying that, I directly hung up Alice's call. Once she thought that falling in love with Matthew was a remarkable thing. She felt that she was greater than anyone else. She felt that rebelling against the teacher was the greatest freedom. Now, I heard that later Alice was depressed for a long time. This was all told to me by Olivia. Since becoming friends with Olivia, we have been in contact. Olivia's academic performance is not good. Sometimes when she has a headache looking at company documents, she comes to ask me. I have guided her several times. She knows that I major in financial management. Usually, she comes to me for help with the things that Alice's father tests her on. And the projects that Alice's father gave to Olivia for practice have also become projects for me to practice. Under the cultivation of Alice's father, I had excellent grades in 4 years of college. As soon as I graduated, I had at least 3 years of work experience. I also know 7 or 8 out of 10 about the internal situation of the Sue family. After graduating from college and returning to my hometown, Alice's father suggested that I get engaged to Olivia. My parents disagreed, but I directly said yes with a smile. Okay, Olivia and I can talk to each other well. Getting married is also good for both companies. At a joint gathering of the two families, I agreed without hesitation. Olivia is definitely overjoyed, but there is a flash of barely perceptible panic in her eyes. Of course she should be panicked. She has hooked up with many men outside these years. However, I don't care. Alice was the first to stand up and oppose. She has a prosthesis on, but after all, she is not the healthy and perfect her anymore. In the past, she was a cold goddess who could dance Black Swan. I object. Alex, don't you like me anymore? It should be us who get engaged. She looked at me pitifully, as if I was the one who abandoned her. Alice, that was all when we were kids. Besides, didn't you like Matthew? I directly stabbed Alice's wound. The name Matthew has long been her taboo. He hasn't come back for so many years. It must be because he is guilty. No matter how Alice brainwashes herself, this is an unchangeable fact. When you broke a leg for that Matthew. In the future, when Alex sees your leg, he will think that you once lost a leg for another man. How can we live like this? Olivia's mother said. Alice's mother lay in bed for 2 years. Alice's father couldn't bear it and sued for divorce. Then he turned around and married Olivia's mother. Now she has nothing to do with the Alice family. However, Alice still has money, and Alice's mother's life is not too difficult. But what I want is for the whole Alice family to be unlucky. I and Olivia got married soon. After getting married, I took over the Alice family. Alice's father has always thought that Olivia has no ability. Over the years, he has cultivated her only to let her understand the company structure. In the end, the Alice family still has to rely on me to support it. After getting married to Olivia, I gradually learned some truths about the incident back then. Olivia called her friends while drunk at a disco one day and mentioned Matthew's name. That guy Matthew actually ran away. What should we do now? Find a way to prevent him from returning to the country. This guy is really lucky. He can still escape alive after going to northern Myanmar. But it doesn't matter. He is not innocent in that matter. We have videos. He can't threaten us. I was lying on the bed. When Olivia opened the door to see if I was asleep, I quickly closed my eyes. As expected, it was Olivia who planned this case. As for the reason why Olivia didn't appear in my previous life, I can also guess. They accidentally killed Matthew, and then Olivia ran away. In my previous life, nothing happened to Alice. Naturally, Alice's father would not offend an excellent daughter for an Olivia who had committed a crime. In this life, Alice is no longer excellent. Even with a physical disability, Alice's father naturally will not give up on Olivia, this daughter. I quickly sent people to inquire about Matthew's news at the border and also sent people to watch in Beicheng. Matthew is now desperate. He has no one to rely on. The only person he can turn to is Olivia. Sure enough, soon, my people sent Matthew's photo. He was frighteningly thin and had bruises all over his body. But that face was still fair and clean. I couldn't help but curl my lips and smile. It seems that he can also be desperate. But he still looks much older than his peers. Matthew quickly found Olivia. He asked Olivia for a large sum of money. Olivia told him to leave Beicheng quickly. Matthew naturally refused. He secretly stayed in Beicheng. And he has been inquiring about Alice. I sent someone to give Matthew a little news that Alice still loves him. I said that Alice has been sad for him all these years. Matthew was really excited. I was also very excited. When he contacts Alice, the good show will begin. 13. The company of the Alice family was soon investigated by relevant authorities due to business problems. Olivia was also reported for some illegal things she did in bars because she went to discos all year round. Olivia was taken to the police station for investigation. Of course, all this was done by me finding people. Matthew also contacted Alice when Olivia was locked in the detention center and was caught that night. Alice glared with red eyes and angrily lashed out at Matthew in pain. Why did you run away? I just found it funny. As long as Matthew doesn't run away, Alice can find an excuse for her leg injury. She is for great love and freedom. Matthew's escape made her a complete joke. Alice has been looking for the murderer who hurt her at the beginning. Because she is so painful. She must find the murderer in order to cheer up. Matthew was worried about being implicated and immediately told all the evil deeds of Olivia and others. When Olivia was still in the detention center, all her crimes were made public. The Alice family was completely in chaos. It turns out that Matthew is someone Olivia specially arranged to be by Alice's side. Since childhood, Alice not only had excellent grades and beautiful appearance but also had the company of her parents. While she and her mother depended on each other and didn't even have money for schooling, her heart had long been unbalanced. Since junior high school, she has been hanging out outside and has been keeping an eye on Alice since then. She watched Alice being picked up and dropped off by a driver every day. She watched Alice become an excellent student in everyone's mouth. She was so jealous that she wanted to destroy her. Once this thought appeared, she could no longer control it. First, she wanted to destroy Alice's good grades. So she found someone to tempt Alice to have puppy love. She observed her for a long time. She found that Alice didn't like those with good grades, those who were enthusiastic, or those who were warm and considerate. Dull and handsome boys didn't attract her either. Finally, she found that it seemed that no bad student had confessed to her yet. At that time, she felt there was a chance. She had always been hanging out outside and knew all kinds of boys who mixed with society. Matthew was the most vain, had the worst family background, and had the least bottom line among the people she knew. She only gave Matthew 500 yuan and asked him to approach Alice. Unexpectedly, he succeeded immediately. Things went smoothly beyond her expectation. Later, Matthew took a fancy to Alice's family conditions and wanted to quit. But Olivia, of course, wouldn't allow it. They were not good people to begin with. They beat Matthew on the spot, humiliated him in various ways, took videos, and threatened Matthew to trick Alice out. At that time, Olivia was so jealous. She didn't expect that even a trashy man like Matthew dared to betray her. Later, Matthew tricked Alice out. For Matthew, Alice left first and tried to hold those people back by herself. In the end, she was insulted by the people arranged by Olivia. Even after Alice fainted, Matthew joined them in the chaos. When I conveyed these to Alice, her eyes were bloodshot and her hands tightly grasped her thighs. So that's it. So that's it. I regret it so much. I really regret it. Alice looked at me crying. Alex, you said that at the hospital at that time. It would have been great if I hadn't answered that call. If only you had hidden my phone at that time. You said you liked me so much at that time. Why didn't you block his call for me? If only you had stopped it. Then everything would be different and I wouldn't have lost my leg. She tried to morally kidnap me. I just sneered. Alice, Alice. Back then, for your great love, you didn't even care about your dad. Isn't Matthew the one you love the most? Didn't you ask for all this? Why are you still regretting it? 14. I ignored her anymore and turned and went to the detention center. Olivia looked decadent. She seemed to feel sorry for me. I didn't say anything blaming her. I just put 3 materials in front of her. One was the share transfer document of the Sue family, one was her infertility report, and the other was my infertility report. Olivia looked at me in shock. You know everything? It had been 3 years since we got married and she still couldn't get pregnant. Alice's father and Olivia were very anxious. They were worried that I would find someone else to have a child. So all these years she had been looking for people outside and trying to get pregnant as soon as possible. And for so many years, Alice's father had actually been very wary of me. He was worried that I would control the Alice family. So he didn't want the child Olivia gave birth to be mine. For so many years, Olivia had been secretly putting infertility drugs in my water. I had always known. Well, I know everything. But I don't care. I love you as a person. I know that all these years it has been Alice's father who has been forcing you to do things you don't want to do. I don't mind. I held her hand and gently touched her head. Now the Sue family is in turmoil and chaos and is facing bankruptcy. I don't want you to be involved in the affairs of the Alice family anymore. I am going to sell the shares. When you come out, let's adopt a child. Then our family of 3 will live a good life. Olivia looked at me moved and then lowered her head and covered her face and cried bitterly. I transfer all the shares to you. You sell all the shares. Take this money and start a new business. When I come out, our family of 3 will manage it well. Let's get a fake divorce first. Olivia refused to accept the bankruptcy of the Alice family. For so many years, I have been guiding her to make company decisions. She has long become conceited and confident that her decisions are correct. Okay, I'll wait for you to come out. With tears in my eyes, I put on a show of deep affection between husband and wife. After leaving the detention center, I immediately contacted a lawyer to handle the divorce and share matters. Alice didn't agree with me selling the shares. Alex, don't sell. Believe me. We can definitely help the Sue family get through the difficulties together. I just want to be with Xiaoying well and live a peaceful life. So I don't accept your suggestion. In these years, Alice and Olivia's identities have been reversed. She is extremely jealous of Olivia now. Olivia is so bad. She deliberately found someone to hurt me. She did all this. Why do you still love her? This is the thing that makes her most collapse. Matthew, whom she loves wholeheartedly, is just a money-worshipping and cowardly hypocrite. And I, whom she has always despised, am full of love for the person she loves. She can't accept it. Alex. I was wrong. Look at me, okay? The person you love should have been me. She shouted hysterically. She was resentful and unwilling. It was the most crushing thing for her that such a bad Olivia could get my wholehearted love. If you want to keep the Sue family, then you take out your own money to buy back these shares. After that, it's up to you how you want to operate the company. Alice didn't have many shares. Most of them were transferred to Olivia's name. The shares on Alice's father's side were also transferred to me. This was the result of Olivia's persuasion. For so many years, Alice's father also knew some corruption inside the Sue family. She also knew that the Sue family was indeed on the decline. For Alice to truly control the Sue family, it would cost a lot of money. In the end, she still bought it. Because without the Sue family, Alice would be completely useless. But there wasn't enough money. She could only mortgage or sell off her assets and borrow money everywhere. In the end, she barely became the person in power of the Sue family. And I got the sold shares. Not many, 200 million. Because I was worried that Alice would give up if she couldn't raise enough money, I didn't ask for an exorbitant price. 15 Not long after Alice secured that position, I used the hidden dangers that had been planted long ago to put the Sue family in the spotlight again. A series of scandals of the Sue family were exposed. Many projects were suspended for various reasons and funds couldn't be collected for a long time. In the end, bankruptcy was still declared. Fortunately, all the debts of the company were on Olivia's head, while Alice only held shares. She just got nothing. No, she still owed the money borrowed to buy the shares. Tens of millions. Not too much. But for Alice, who has a disability and no work experience, this is enough to crush her. As for our family's company, I have been asking my dad to sell shares all these years. Now he is no longer the person in power of the Alex family company. When I sold the shares of the Alice family, my parents flew to a tropical country. I had long handled immigration for them. They were going to enjoy their later years. After watching the bankruptcy of the Sue family, I also disappeared. 2 years later, I appeared in Beijing again with my wife. It was winter again in Beijing. The cold wind blew on people's faces like a knife. I heard that Olivia's mother ran away after leaving Alice's father. After the bankruptcy of the Alice family, Alice's mother was dragged to death because there was no money for treatment. And Alice and her father lived in a small rental house in a city village. When they saw me appear, the two people's eyes lit up. But when they saw me holding the hand of a beautiful woman, Alice's father's face was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. Alex, where have you been? She? Who is she? She is my wife. I smiled. Alice's father covered his heart and looked terrified.